unholy, indivisible, with liberty and justice for.
Welcome. Well, we got a little bit different tonight.
Yes, we have, per your rules of procedure with the town of Lancaster for 5A designation of officers, annually at the first meeting of the select board after town elections, a chair and vice chair shall be designated. The chair shall be the select board member who is beginning the third and final year of their term. In this case, that is select chair Lavoy. Thank you. And the vice chair shall be the select board member beginning the second year of their term. Select member Rado.
Usually take a vote, so I'll make a motion to make Kathy Jean the chairman for the selectmen for the ensuing year.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Okay. I'm still here. All in favor?
Aye.
Now it's all you. I have an hour.
That's Jessica.
I'm in fine.
Thank you very much. First up,
Thank you, sir.
thank you very much. First up this evening, department head updates. Chief Flynn.
I apologize, we don't have the inspection report. Chris was busy all day. But I can email out to you. Last month, we did 57 911 calls, 72 transfers, a total of 129. Year to, 2025, we did 53 911 calls, and then 105 transfers, for a total of 158. Year to date, for 2026, 139 in one calls and 210 transfers. Last year is 122 in one calls and 222 transfers. So sorry, I didn't total it. We had 85 transfer requests. We turned 13 down due to staffing, which means either we were out on other calls or we've had some call outs as far as sickness. Ambulance 4 and 8 will be inspected by the state tomorrow, which they inspect the equipment and everything on the truck to make sure it's in date and that we have everything we need. The ladder truck is back finally and repaired. The unfortunate part is, while they were testing it, they did find that we had a motor gun on the gun on the ladders was controlled remotely, and there's two motors on it. One of them burned out, so they had to order another one, and I put the price for repair up. Other than that, we're in good shape. Good shape for it.
Good for you.
Something good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eli.
First of all, thanks to Warren and Jeff for allowing me to keep my position after the monstrosity my budget was to some. So thank you. So we have our Spanish program called La Magica. It's doubled in numbers to 13. Zayani wasn't wanting too many, so she's just teaching the class for herself, but good to see more kids interested in that. Our baseball numbers closed last week. We're at 173. So not bad numbers, especially compared to some of the towns around. We're still going strong. We got our Easter egg hunt, flashlight Easter egg hunt on April 4th. Doing it like we did last year. We got the youngins at 5:45, and then we'll wait a little bit, have the golden eggs distributed around the town. Have people walk and try to find those families, and then rejoin back at Anfield and have flashlights and at 7:45 for 4 to 6, and 8 o'clock for the 7 to 12-year-olds. Seemed to go well last year and keeps them from getting eggs so super quickly. At least they can have to look a little bit. And then, we were in works to try to find some lifeguards. We found out that a couple of them are leaving us. So we put in word to the high school to try to spread the word out. Try to, get some more. I think we only have one right now. Sure, so. We're in a little bit of, scrim mode. At least they gave us some time, but, we're looking for those. I think one of our lifeguards who is moving on, that talked with us, and he's still interested in doing lessons, but not just not the other stuff, so that's good, but, he just have for all of it. But, we got districts at Colonel Town this year for All Stars, so it'll be a, busy weekend for that. We don't think I have the dates yet, but, we'll be doing that at Steve Fields, paired fields for the 10U and the 12U baseball. So gearing up for that, we're gonna get it back stuff on the C field, that you'll Ryan and myself to try to get that done, soon that the snow's melted and the ground's good. Yeah.
Anything for you? I want to say, and just for the record, I think people, don't always remember that your expense budget, while whatever dollar amount it is, I don't have it in front of me, also comes with a pretty sizable revenue stream that is restricted funding. So the net amount of Colonel Town is extremely affordable for the number of people and the number of programs that are served by it. So you have, a lot of support in this town, and I'm glad that, people demonstrate their support to you when they do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Matthews.
So I just kind of scrolled the forms that John does here. So since the last meeting, we had 515 calls for service, 4 crash reports, 156 car stops, and 12 arrests. That same time frame last year, calls for service, we only had 8 more, so 523, 8 crashes, 181 stops, and we had 20 arrests. So pretty similar. Even I would assume the arrest difference is that we're understaffed at this point. So we're, instead of 2 guys at a time, we're 1 guy at a time. Year to date this year, we've gone to 1,428 calls for service, 18 crashes, 407 stops, and we've got 35 arrests. Last year, at this time, we had a positive 139 calls for service, so we've got a few more. We had 25 crashes, 436 stops, so only a difference of 30 there, and arrests again is a big difference from 51 last year to only 35 this year. And 4 calls for service, that just means that 1 guy's tied up and can't be out doing other stuff, so usually there's a second guy checking other calls for him. Mileages, the cruiser number 1, the 2025, 17,212. Cruiser 2 is the 21 cruiser, has 92,422. The 2019 had 117,572. Well, too tired. Cruiser 5 has, the 23 has 74,868. A few notes I put down. We've done 2 polygraphs on our new hires. All 3 did the oral boards. They all did well. We picked 2 guys for the oral board to decide on. The polygraphs went good. Hoping to get them into the academy in May. They're already waiting list for that. So the next one's August. It'll depend if people fail the PT test on the entrance, then our guys will get in. Officer Commissar's taking on the prosecution. He's learning on the fly, he's doing a good job. So since Kyler's last day was Saturday, we're going to have some on-call time to maintain our 24 hours without relying on state police. There's a total of 4 guys at the PD. The shifts don't match, but as it is, I'll be working 6 days a week for the most part to make that work. One thing I didn't write down on here, sure I've seen on Facebook, was the call that led to a seizure of 3 fingers of fentanyl.
For those that don't know, finger is literally a glove finger, a rubber glove finger full of fentanyl. Each one's about 10 grams. So this girl got 30 grams, caught with about 35 grams in total fentanyl right in John parking lot. She'd previously been caught somewhere in the county with like 100 grams of fentanyl, and she was on like a sweetheart deal. So she's probably not going to get that same deal this time. So there's still plenty of drug activity around.
Mike, first of all, thank you for being here and stepping up during this time.
course.
Is there anything you need from us?
Don't think so. Good.
Thank you very much. One last thing from Barbara. She had a staffing conflict this evening. She needed to step in, but everything is going well over at the library. Their drain is holding up in this melt off. And there was only one small issue in the roof with an ice dam. So everything's working along fine from over at the library. Multi-programming. Want to thank the department heads this evening. Feel free to head on out. And up next is an appointment with Tim Green, our auditor.
Good evening. Can you hear me? I can. Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. I'm here to present the audit report for the year end December 31st, 2024. We recently issued that dated early February. We start typically every year in May, try to get the bulk of it done through field work at that time. As you know, you transition from your longtime finance director right before that time as well. So there were some challenges for us on that end. And then in the fall, we had challenges on my end that kind of dragged out this process as well. So all said, I'm pretty optimistic that this 2025 audit is going to be quite smooth compared to that. So starting with that, I'm going to go through this report for you and then answer whatever questions anyone might have. First things first, I always point out this first 3 pages are what you're actually hiring us for, and that's to give you an opinion on your financial statements as a whole. The town has multiple opinion units, so you can get multiple opinions. And in this case, as has been the consistent in past years, you actually have an adverse opinion on your governmental and business type activities, and then you have a unmodified opinion on each major fund and your aggregate fund remaining information. The adverse opinion strictly is because of OPEB, other post-employment benefits. The town has not determined that balance, that liability. In doing so, you would be required to hire an actuary, and the actuary would look at your health insurance plans, would look at your census of your population and ages and all the actuarial stuff that they do, and to determine that liability. So, I always say to all my clients who haven't implemented that study is it's truly a cost benefit. Are you hearing from your lenders that they don't like that you have an adverse, or are you hearing from the public, or are you hearing from, what other stakeholders are actually having concerns with this versus, the cost, which I think it's relative. 3,000 to 6,000, depending on how big of a client you are to that actuary, is kind of roughly the ballpark, if you will, but it is an annual cost. So again, that's what impact you have on that adverse. I'm not sure. It's kind of what you guys are seeing as a board and as a town. So, but again, as I said, from there, you do have an unmodified opinion on your general fund, your other major funds, and your aggregate remaining fund information. The rest of our opinion letter is pretty standard. Just it details what responsibility the town and management has, and what responsibilities we have. It discusses that the town presents some required supplementary information. These are schedules related to your New Hampshire retirement liability. As well, you present some supplementary information in the form of a combining statement of your non-major funds, as well as an individual general fund statements, which provide a lot of extra detail for the reader. So from there, I'll highlight some important concepts within the financial statements themselves, starting on Exhibit 1. These are your governmental activities and business type activities, statement of net position. This is full accrual basis. So this is reporting all your capital assets. This is reporting all your long-term liabilities, not just your current resources, which are shown further on. So you can see in the first column, your governmental activities, you have total assets about 24 million. You have deferred outflows of resources of about 500,000. and you have total liabilities of just under 5.5 million. Within those liabilities, you can see the significant ones kind of jump out. It's your intergovernmental payable, which represents primarily amount to the school district for that 6-month period where your fiscal year versus calendar year. And then you can see your net pension liability is just over 3 million. So those make up the bulk of the liabilities for the governmental activities. You have some deferred inflows of resources, and then you have net position, which is broken down into certain categories. The total net position of 18.5 million, but of that, about 7.4 million represents capital assets, net of the debt related to those capital assets. And then you also have restricted balances for endowments. You have the non-expendable portion, 1.3 million, and then the expendable portion, another 300,000. And then you have restricted for other purposes, about 7.5 million. Those amounts make up primarily your Colonel Town Trust Fund, and then like your library fund and so on. So those are obviously restricted for the purposes within those, either by law in the form of the library or by the endowment in the form of the Colonel Town Trust. That leaves you with the unrestricted fund balance of just under 2 million. That's a increase from the year before of about $160,000 in that unrestricted fund balance number. Now that number can fluctuate year to year depending on if the state has, really, unfortunately, that net pension liability is a factor on these first two exhibits as far as any changes year to year from the state side, as far as how the investments did, how their actuaries determining what that number, those discount rate, and the various factors that go into those numbers do affect your unrestricted position, because that's the bulk of the balance sheet, if you will, the net position that is in that's not tied up in your capital assets or your investments for your trust funds and so on. So it kind of does fluctuate a lot depending on how that liability number changes. The business type activities, this is a kind of the summary column of your water and sewer funds. They're shown individually on the same accounting basis, all full accrual. And you can see your business type activities in total have about $10 million in assets, about just over 4 million in liabilities, and a resulting net position of about 5.7 million. Of that, clearly 5.2 million is tied up in capital assets and the related debt for those. And you're left with an unrestricted net position in your business type activities of about 475,000. Exhibit 2. This is a statement of activities, again, on a full accrual basis, but it just breaks down your governmental activities by function. It shows you the program revenues that are relate to those functions, such as charges for services. You have operating grants and you have capital grants, and they show in this exhibit shows you if they're tied to a specific activity or if they are general revenue. You can see general revenues, primarily property taxes, of course. Those are raised to support all functions of the town, not just a specific activity. You have some grants that are non-restricted to specific programs, such as your meals and room and meals tax, excuse me. And you can see the net change in net position for the governmental activities was an increase of about 1.3 million. There was a couple restatements to correct some balances. So your restated beginning net position was just over 17 million, and your net position ending was 18.5 million. And the same for business type activities. You can see a small decrease in net position of about 10,000. So the beginning of the year, the total business type activities net position was 5.7 million, and you ended 10,000 less, 5.7 again. Moving forward, Exhibit 3, this is your balance sheet for your governmental funds. So this is on a modified accrual basis. So this is focused on current resources. Revenues can be recorded if they're available to use. So meaning if they're received within 60 days of year end. Liabilities are recorded when they cover that period versus a long-term debt type liability where you have, 20-year repayment period. Because you're appropriating your annual debt payments on these exhibits. So you can see each column represents a major fund. General fund was major, your library, the expendable trust funds, and the Colonel Town Trust. Major funds could change year to year if they fluctuate in balances. I don't believe that the town of Lancaster has seen much change. These funds are pretty significant, so they tend to outweigh all your other funds anyways. So the first column, again, your general fund. Total assets at the end of the year was 5.7 million. Of that, 3.8 million is cash. You had another 750,000 in tax receivables and about 400,000 in other accounts receivable. Your liabilities, just over 2 million. Of that, again, is the school tax liability. So the last 6 months of that period, about 1.7 million. You have deferred revenue, 1.3. That would represent primarily your taxes that are not collected within 60 days, as well as grants. Actually, let me look this one up. Sorry, you had some unspent grant money from ARPA, which had to be obligated but not yet expended, as well as some of that highway money and bridge aid that the state sent out over 2 years, a couple years ago. So that is a big chunk of that on that deferred revenue as well. When you receive grant money up front, it's not you don't record the revenue until you expend it. So you can see the total fund balance at the end of the year was 2.3 million, almost 2.4. Of that, you have the 5 categories of fund balances. You have non-spendable, which represents prepaid items and tax deeded property. They're not in a form where you can spend that for other expenses in the next year. You have restricted fund balance about 20,000. You have a committed fund balance of 550,000. You have assigned fund balance of 200,000, and you have an unassigned fund balance of 1.5 million. That unassigned fund balance is a decrease from the year before, about 120,000. Typically, it has to do with when your committed fund balance goes up, your unassigned goes down. I think the actual results for the year were a positive increase of 260,000, whereas the year before you had a slight decrease in total fund balance of 138, but the allocation actually caused a decrease in your unassigned fund balance. Typically, depending on the reasoning, that tends to flip back and forth year to year as you know, you may have not got all your projects done at 1 year, so you have some committed and assigned fund balance, and then the next year you've kind of cleaned up that portion and you can see your unassigned go back up. For the rest of your major funds, you can see the library end of the year with a fund balance of about 1.6 million, primarily cash and investments related to that. The expendable trust fund has 1.7. Again, cash and investments make up the bulk of that. And Colonel Town Trust has about 5.8 million in that fund. Again, they have cash and investments and nothing else. And then the total other governmental funds, you can see about a combined total of about 2 million in assets, $260,000 interfund payable, meaning they another fund paid a bill on their behalf. It was expensed to those funds, but the cash was paid out of the general fund, so it's owed there. So that's what the 260,000 represents. Typically, there may be some other factors in there. And then you can see your total fund balance is 1.6, made up of non-spendable portion. Those primarily would be endowments that you can't touch, and then your restricted portion of 300,000. And you can see you actually have a slight deficit unassigned fund balance, 60,000. When we get to the back exhibit, you'll actually be able to see which fund makes up those balances. Exhibit 4, this is just a crosswalk between the two different accounting standards. So Exhibit 1 and 2 is a full accrual again, and Exhibits 3 and 5 are modified accrual. And then you have Exhibits 4 and you have Exhibit 6, which say, here's what one statement says, here's what the other statement says, what are the differences? So basically it shows you that on Exhibit 1, you have capital assets of about 13 million and accumulated depreciation of another 6 million. So you can see that that's an increase in net position of 7.5 million versus where Exhibit 3, you don't show those capital assets at all. You just have capital outlay reducing your fund balance. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'll move on to Exhibit 5. This is your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, again, on a modified accrual basis. So you can see you have a general fund here. Total revenues for the general fund, about 7.6 million. Total expenditures, 7.4 million. So you had an excess of revenue over expenditures of 225,000. You had some transfers in and some transfers out. So you had a net transfer amount of 35,000 increase. So your net change in fund balance is 260,000. Again, the restated fund balance at the beginning of the year was 2.1 million, and your ending fund balance in total was 2.3, as we talked about in Exhibit 3. the Weeks Memorial Library, you can see you had a net change in fund balance, about $130,000 increase. The Expendable Trust Fund had about $121,000 increase, and the Colonel Town Trust had an increase of $780,000. Exhibit 6, again, this is a crosswalk between Exhibit 5 and Exhibit 2. So you can see basically what's an expenditure on Exhibit 5, such as capital outlay of $600,000 is actually an asset on Exhibit 1. It comes off of Exhibit 2 and becomes a capital asset on Exhibit 1. Whereas depreciation expense shows up as an expense on Exhibit 2, but is not an expense on Exhibit 5. I think the rest is understanding that. The rest should be self-explanatory. But you can see the net change in governmental activities again was that 1.3 million. Exhibit 7, this is a budget to actual for the general fund on the budgetary basis. So the only difference between budgetary basis and modified accrual basis for the town of Lancaster is how you report the fact that you have encumbrances and deferred tax revenue. The town doesn't defer on the budgetary basis because the theory is that the town can ultimately collect on taxes through the deeding process if necessary. So you may have some abatements, but essentially you can collect almost 100% of that tax revenue. It just takes you 3 years or so if you wanted to. So those deferred tax revenues gets removed on your budgetary exhibits. And there is a reconciliation note within the notes as well to show that. So you can see you have an original budget and a final budget. You show these two columns whenever you have unanticipated revenue that you expend as well, such as a grant or just a general unanticipated revenue like a donation or something. So you always show that gross. So you show an original budget, which is going to tie out to your town meeting and tax rate papers, and then you have a final budget, which represents the gross up of all that unanticipated, all those unanticipated sources. And then you have an actual column. You can see the total revenues, the far right column there, your variance. Your final estimated figure is about 7.4 million, and your actual revenues of 7.7. So you had a positive variance there of 340,000. Your final budget figure is about 7.7 million. Let's be more specific, 7,765,000. Your actual expenditures are 7,750,000. So you had a positive variance of about 15,000. And then your transfers, you anticipated a net decrease in that other financing sources through transfers of about 19,000, and you actually had a positive increase of 35,000. So that variance is actually a positive effect on your total of 54,000. So you can see the net change in fund balance in that second column there, the final budget being a negative 385,000. That represents the fact that the town expected to lose 385,000. That was the hole that you plugged with fund balance, essentially. But you could see on that variance column that you actually had a positive net change in fund balance of 400,000. So you had a pretty good swing there, budgetarily speaking. Your actual net change in fund balance, your revenues minus expenditures and other financing sources, was a $26,000 increase on the budgetary basis. You had an increase in net spend and non-spendable fund balance of 10,000, which means you have a decrease in unassigned fund balance. So your beginning unassigned fund balance on the budgetary basis was 1,970,000, and your ending figure was 1,986,000. That unassigned fund balance is a decrease from the prior year of about 40,000, 35 to 40,000, primarily because of changes in the other fund balance classifications. Exhibit 8, 9, and 10, these are your business type activities. This is a breakdown by fund, your water department, your sanitation department. Total assets you can see for the water department, 6 million. For sanitation, 4 million. You have total liabilities for water, about 2.7, primarily made up of debt. Same for sanitation, you have 1.6 million in liabilities. Of that, 1.45 roughly is bonds and notes payable. So you can see your net position. For the water fund, your total net position of 3.4 million of that is primarily made up of capital assets, net of debt. So you had a slight deficit unrestricted fund balance of $30,000, which is a decrease from the year before from 50,000. So you're headed in the right direction. And then with sanitation, you can see that you have unrestricted fund balance of $500,000, and then a net investment in capital assets of $1.8 million. The $500,000 unrestricted balance is an increase of about $20,000 from the year before. Exhibit 9, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in net position. You can see total operating revenues for the water department of $555,000, for the sanitation department $535,000, total operating expenses for the water $430,000, and for sanitation $560,000. So you can see you had an operating income of $125,000 for water and an operating loss of $25,000 for sanitation. And then you have some non-operating revenue and expenditures, basically just interest on debt and interest earned on bank accounts. So you have a net non-operating expense of $68,000 in water and $41,000 in sanitation. So you can see net change in net position for the water department was an increase of $56,000, whereas the sanitation department was a decrease of $67,000. And exhibit 10, for business type activities, you do present a statement of cash flows. To point out here, I think is interesting is that your net cash provided by operations for water and sewer are both positive. So $268,000 increase in water through operating activities, and with sanitation $75,000. Cash flows for capital and related activities was a decrease for water of $269,000, whereas sanitation is about $94,000. So you can see how those operations versus paying off debt factor in together in your cash flows. You can see the water had a $60 increase in cash by the end of the year, and sanitation had a $3,000 decrease in cash. Exhibit 11 and 12, these are fiduciary exhibits. Your fiduciary funds, you have private purpose trust and you have custodial, all held by your trustees of trust funds. Custodial represent funds held for other entities such as the school district, whereas private purpose trusts are funds held for the town, but they're not available to all the town as a whole, such as like a cemetery fund is a permanent fund that benefits the town as a whole. A private purpose trust is more like a scholarship, which really only benefits a certain person at a certain time. The total for your private purpose trust, you can see is $60,000 in net position, and your custodial funds you're holding is just over $2 million. Exhibit 12 again is change in fund and change in those fiduciary net position. Private purpose trust increased by about $3,000, and custodial funds you're holding increased by about $765,000. For the notes, I could certainly answer questions on it, but I'm not going to go through any specific item. They're designed to detail the town's accounting policies, the town's significant assets and liabilities. It provides more detail. So, for example, you break down your tax receivables by levy. You report your debt service amounts by each individual item. So, it provides a lot of informational stuff. And these are, I'll remind the board that this whole financial statement is theoretically from the town. We do prepare it as a service outside of an actual audit. Independent standards require obviously you to take responsibility for this. So if there's ever more information you want to provide on some balances or something that you want to add here within the framework of how a financial statement should be presented, that's certainly something that you can do. I encourage you. That's why part of the process is giving you a draft and letting you say, well, what about you're not really talking about XYZ, and we should talk about it. And that's great. let's put that in there. So I always like to remind them. Sometimes it's hands off, and it doesn't need to be. So jumping ahead to the required supplementary information, which is on page 39. Town is required to provide 10 years of information related to its net pension liability and its OPEB if it reported OPEB. So you have two exhibits for your net pension liability. You can see the rolling. Now you've gotten 10 years or more of reporting on this GASB standard for net pension liability. So that 10-year always drops off now at this point. And you can just see what percentage of the total liability is the town's portion, what that total liability is and how it's changed over the years, as well as how your payroll has changed over the years. You can see the net pension liability actually decreased by about $300,000 from the year before. But 4 years ago, it was 2.4 million. Now it's 3.3. So, it does fluctuate again when interest rates go up or down. It tends to be pretty big swings for the small communities. 14, Exhibit 14 again, it's net pension information. This is your contributions and how much you actually make and your pay as you go, essentially. Most communities now are used to this, but when this standard was first introduced, some would be like, well, what if we just fund that liability? And unfortunately, the bad news is you want to raise $3.3 million to get rid of that liability, and you just share that with everyone else in the state. So it's just a balance that you will be carrying. Exhibit 15, these are your supplementary schedules. Combining balance sheet for your non-major funds. You can see the town reports the cemetery fund, conservation commission, a motor vehicle waste fund, and the permanent fund. Cemetery fund is showing a deficit of 62,000. That deficit has decreased from 78,000 the year before. That trend has been consistent the last 3 years, I'd say at least 3 or 4 years. So Conservation Commission, on Exhibit 16, the next page is combining schedule of revenues, expenditures. You can see conservation increased by about 8,000. Your motor vehicle waste fund decreased by about 9,000. You had some additional expenditures. And then the permanent fund increased by about 90,000. Exhibit 17, 18 are detailed exhibits for the general fund for revenues and again for expenditures. You can just see your significant revenue sources and where you were compared to your estimated amounts. These estimated columns are on the final budget, as we talked about earlier. Same with the appropriation column. That would be considered the final appropriation number. So for the expenditures, you did encumber funds from the year before, plus your appropriations, less expenditures, less your encumbrances rolling forward to 2025. And on page 45, you can see the bottom line variance of $99,000 positive variance for your budget results. Exhibit 19 on page 46, I think, is one of the better exhibits of the whole financial statements. This is a schedule of your unassigned fund balance. It shows you how your activity ties into everything from beginning to end of the year. So you can see unassigned fund balance, $1,970,000. Again, there's that figure we talked about where you appropriated $385,000 from fund balance. You had a revenue surplus of $300,000 and an unexpended balance of appropriations of about $100,000. So you had a budget surplus of just over $400,000. And then you had an increase in non-spendable of $10,000. So that's a decrease in unassigned fund balance. So those three results, you can see how your beginning balance got you to the ending balance of $1,986,000. Looking at that budget surplus, I just like to compare that to past years. It doesn't really, it's just an interesting, that's about 5% of your total general fund appropriations. Year before, you had $640,000 budget surplus, which is 7.65%. The year before that, you were actually $460,000, so pretty consistent to this year. Now, that doesn't really provide you with specific management information because that budget surplus, again, could be a bigger revenue surplus or a smaller revenue surplus. For example, last year, you actually had a revenue deficit, but you had a much bigger unexpended balance of your appropriation. So you actually had a better budget surplus, but the revenue side was you were overestimating your revenues. And I would point out too that revenues are sometimes, the estimated revenues I see sometimes are overlooked by communities. You hit that, you go too aggressive with those estimates. That puts you in a hole a lot faster than, having your budget be tight. You can kind of, you can stop spending, if you will, theoretically, but no money comes in, you definitely will run out of cash faster versus underestimating and then achieving better results. But again, if you're underestimating your revenues, that creates a bigger hole that gets filled with your tax revenues. So it is certainly up to the board's kind of philosophy on where you're attacking, your annual budget. The last exhibit, last letter is our letter to management. We add this every year, whether or not we have something to report. We keep this letter to report significant items. Technically it's significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We'll sometimes put in information that we just like to communicate if we think it's something that's worthwhile of being out there. While we're doing an audit, we also work with staff and management just to on less important items as far as we can recommend some better ways of doing something if we see it, but it's not a finding of the town's not doing anything wrong. But if we see a better way to do a process or something, we'll just kind of provide that recommendation on site while we're there. Obviously, with the timing of this, makes much more sense to provide that feedback instantly versus waiting until the year's already over. We did put in a note though this year, the extra time spent going through the records in that transition between finance directors certainly could have been prevented with a better record keeping system, I think. So I just wanted to point that out, that we do hope this doesn't happen again, so that it is a smoother transition for the next, whenever that would be. But beyond that, that's pretty much all I was prepared to present. If we have questions, I'll happily answer them.
Tim, can you hear me?
I can.
I've got a quick, first of all, quick comment. Thank you for again explaining about the adverse opinion on the post-employment benefits. I think it's good that we hear it, and the public that watch the video hear it every year. I do have a couple questions on that. What are you seeing as far as this with other communities of our size, or or in the North Country? Are all of us sitting with the same situation?
It's a mixed bag. Some do budget for that study every year. I'm not hearing too much pushback from banks yet. As far as I know, a lot of communities go through the bond bank, and they're really familiar with this and what it represents. So, you certainly have that resource, which I think is helpful in that way. Again, it's just you have to just look at it and say, well, are we tired of either hearing the negative feedback from what we're getting, or are we saying we're not seeing it, we're not getting a different interest rate because we have an adverse on governmental activities? Because most communities can explain to a bank, a local bank specifically, like, this isn't our budget, this isn't our general fund, this is just this is the full accrual statement. It does give a picture of the town's position, but a lot of it's tied up into unfunded liabilities like the pension retirement, so it is what it is. So again, it's truly what kind of feedback you're getting.
Again, that would be an annual actuarial we would need. This would be a one-time. Every year we would have to add that to our budget.
Yeah, you're allowed to have like a minor update every other year, but also if you see significant fluctuations in, say, interest rates, that becomes more of a material change, and therefore you are required to get the full actuarial study done. So you can, if things stay consistent for 2 years, you can see a little cost savings year 2, but every 2 years at a minimum, you do have to have a full study.
All the questions I have. Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you doing this every year, the presentation for us, and also your work preparing for getting the audit done. So thank you.
My pleasure. I enjoy working with the town for sure. So we'll see you again this spring.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Next up this evening, there are no public hearings. We have the review of minutes for March 2nd, 2026 for the work session.
Make a motion to accept the minutes of March 27th. I need to abstain because it was not present on March 2nd. I was in Washington, D.C. Okay.
Oh, I get a second. That happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Second your motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And next up, we have the March 2nd, 2026 regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept March
Second.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up this evening is sign various paperwork. First up is a grant of protective covenant, Hampshire RSA 79E8 for 79 Main Street LLC. In reviewing our 79E programs, Jason caught that we failed to file this in July of 2024. So we're looking for your signature this evening. And then next up is the signed approved ordinances from town meeting. We have the prohibiting the public display or solicitation of certain psychoactive substances. This passed at town meeting. We also have the noise and open container ordinance.
Signing a draft. Is that on it?
Oh darn, I'm sorry.
Good say draft.
Yeah, I'll get that for the next meeting. That's the noise and open container ordinance. We also have the drug paraphernalia ordinance. And we have the disorderly actions ordinance. Next up for signed various paperwork, we have the MS 232, which is the report of appropriations actually voted. This is filed 20 days after the end. Next up this evening, new business number one, we have a support letter for municipal renewable energy products. I know that we spoke about this during the March work session. There was SB 538, which would guarantee years of net metering credits for municipal, school, and county solar projects. It did just pass the Senate on March 12th, so they're hoping that by signing the letter, they'll do it at the handoff to the House. So.
What do you say?
Yeah, we're gonna have to try to find the file.
And next up for new business number 2, zoning board appointee recommendations. The Lancaster zoning board of adjustment voted on February 25th, 2026 to recommend the 1, reappointment of Tricia Burnett as a regular member for a term of 3 years expiring in 2029. And 2, the reappointment of Scott Lambert as an alternate member for a term of 3 years expiring in 2029.
Vote on that. Make a motion to approve those appointments as stated.
Second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And for new business number 3, planning board appointee recommendations, the Lancaster Planning Board voted on February 11th, 2026 to recommend the reappointment of Andrew Nadu as regular member with a 3-year term expiring in 2029. On March 11th, 2026, the Lancaster Planning Board voted to recommend for the appointment of Jared Vestal as an alternate member with a 3-year term expiring in 2029. He appeared before the planning board on March 11th and stated his interest in the position.
Make a motion to approve those nominations.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. There is no old business this evening. Next up is select board member reports.
I do not.
Okay.
I do. So Thursday morning, the charity calls me at about 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. Says the alarm is going off in the basement of this building with high water. So on getting here, yes, we had water. So going forward, I think we need to find some revenue somewhere to excavate a little bit in the basement, look at where the water was coming in, to verify there isn't a pipe somewhere there that's introducing the water to the building. If there is no pipe, then the only thing that I can think of is there's a cobble layer of stone from the river that comes underneath this building, because the water was coming out of this corner. We thought we had a water leak. Shut the water off, didn't make any difference. We thought, okay, the storm water drainage has a leak. So we put a pump in the manhole out there to relieve it. That didn't make any difference. So, but it did make a difference. The ice let go and the water dropped. And the water totally dried up in the basement. Just like you see in a tsunami, right? It was here and then it just sucked it out. And it plugged and it just came right back. Somewhere we gotta find some money to address that. And if we can't quite determine what it is, I propose that we put in some bigger sump pump in a pit that will handle the flow that we experience. Instead of going through this every time.
So how would we move forward?
Yeah. Yes. It's been a while since it's flooded, so,
I know.
yeah. Actually think that a better pump system handle the flow.
Yeah.
I don't recall it flooding since we filled in the pit
Nobody else.
on that side of it.
Yeah. So it's totally different than what anybody else here, you know, Tim Brown, Tim Rose, all those guys have seen. They have never seen it, you know.
It's never started on this side. When I walked through the door where Jason used to be, I was like, this is right. Because over in the furnace area was all dry, that side of the building, I was like, and I looked to the left and it was just pouring like in the wall ground area. I was like, a little river here, what's going on here?
And the other thing that I'd like to see is that the town spend some money on some 3-inch trash pumps that could be readily available to respond to something this magnitude or an event. This could happen in Colonel Town, this could happen in other town buildings.
Kind of did happen at the police station a couple of years ago, when we had the big rainstorm.
We don't have these already.
No, I brought all my stuff down to 6. So I think it would be wise for the town to invest in some equipment like that.
Maybe a little bit on department's budgets.
Yeah.
I'll see the face you're making. I had no idea the cost.
But investigate the cost. And
Yeah.
what the possibility is, and
Yeah.
maybe where we can scrape some funds.
Yeah.
Thank you for your fast action.
Thank you.
Sure, she called.
Thank you, Cherry.
I do.
Actually driving down Main Street.
Yeah.
And you know what I said, Alan? Please tell me now. Because I said, I don't know how to do Cynthia Monday night. Always look, somebody forgot to close the call.
Yeah.
But it was shut.
For my report, I have a couple quick things. It seems as though our year actually starts in April when we change chair and we've gotten through the town meeting. So I'm thinking that our April work session is a good time to be an organizational meeting per se. And, can we, kind of map out what the year looks like? For, what I'm concerned with right now is the number of sheer projects we have. All of us have projects. I mean, you know, Maggie, I'm looking at you, and I bet you've got financial software, you know, and how do we set milestones and then deadlines so that we can keep on track? Was there some sort of tool that can be put together? I know you, started a tool with, the Tims and Robin, and I'm assuming that will be wrapped up for the April work session. We can kind of go through that, but can we also add to it, you know, maybe the safety plan? I don't know where we are, the employee personnel plan. How do we stay on track?
You're looking for an operation rhythm.
Thank you. Some cadence and that we can every month say, instead of, because we hear where we are on things, but not where we aren't on everything. And the time slips very quickly. And so how can we use those work sessions for, keeping that cadence? I also think a recap, so we signed the document for 79E. I'll stop with just a quick recap of where we, what properties are on 79E right now. And when they come back on the books at the increased, let's say, assessment to the property. Make sure, I don't know what that process is, but just it's probably a 1-page recap that we could do at the April meeting. And I don't know how, I would like to have a discussion maybe there too about department heads at the select board meetings. You know, we have seen that the attendance has been really good by some of them, a little spotty by others. We get some written reports, we get some verbal reports, and let's talk about what we'd like to see, what our expectation is, whether or not it makes sense that they do it. Maybe they can supply something to Jessica. I don't have an answer, and I don't have a preconceived solution, but a conversation about whether this is working. I think it was implemented when Ben became
It was.
town manager. Is that what it's?
The end of,
Yeah.
yeah. Even with the written reports, it's much better than what we were.
Absolutely. You know, and not all departments will look like, you know, police and fire, but what can we do? What makes sense for all of us as far as the information and also for them, you know, they're putting in the extra time, you know, and, you know, how do we make it valuable? Of course, when it was originally established, it wasn't here, but is it in our needs? Is it meaning, you know, the needs to be able to, you know, get the information, maybe just a conversation about, you know, a work session? Okay. That's all I have to.
Sounds like a fun work session.
More coming out.
More to come. For the town manager report, the fire station and the town hall share a 4,000 gallon heating oil underground. Our oil usage from November 2024 through March of 2025 was 12,617 gallons of oil. From November 25 through today, we used 7,001, well, we've had delivered 7,186 gallons. We haven't gone through the month, but we've used roughly half of our previous usage, which is a savings of over $10,000 by having this more efficient, reliable heating service. Some good news, we received $364,518.23 from our 2024 FEMA damages on March 5th. We need to set a public hearing to accept the funds as unanticipated revenue, so I'm thinking April 6th. I've had in the past couple weeks, one cremation assistance award for welfare, reached out by our active 4-H group in town. They're called the Co-op Canine 4-H Club, and they meet over at the Episcopal Church. Ashley reached out looking to say that they'll be putting out additional dog waste bags, dispensers on private property, and they're looking again to engage with the community. I chatted with her in the fall of last year. A quick note about Kratom. New Hampshire Senate Bill 557 heard testimony on February 5th. I actually listened to that testimony, and at that point, the bill was written to put certain visible labeling parameters in place and to license retailers and to prohibit the sale of Kratom to anyone under 21. On March 12th, it was amended and passed as an act making synthetic and semi-synthetic Kratom illegal. So the synthetic or semi-synthetic Kratom shall be classified as a Schedule II controlled drug. So that was just through the Senate. I had a resident on William Street meet with me regarding drainage off of Prospect Street. I'm looking for past plans and we'll continue to search. I'm going to hit this GIS system later to see what we have in the ground back there. I met with Tyler and John from Colonel Town Players. I advised them we still need to do work on this building, but they may be interested in applying for funding for the auditorium space using their efforts. I'll continue to have conversations probably monthly with them just to check in. We're not at a point where unfortunately we can let them back in, but it's good to have the relationship and keep it going. Met with the Historical Society to understand what they've used in the past for kind of historical events when we think about America 250. I spoke with Barbara about having a series of articles in the papers in July to talk about maybe what Lancaster did with the centennial or the bicentennial or Lancaster 250. We will be meeting with the chamber to launch the parade promotion soon. I'll also be working with either the chamber or the Rotary about a town cleanup, Earth Day kind of event. The town meeting recording was posted to Granite North's YouTube channel, and I did put it on the website so that it was easily accessible to people if they wish to review it. That's it for me. It's busy.
Yes. Next public comments. Do we have any comments from the public tonight? Let's look at Rohan. It's been nice to me tonight.
Yeah.
I got one with gift horse. I'm just checking before I call for you.
If you want, man, I'm sitting here. I'm looking at that valve that's sticking up through the floor for the system. That's a part of the process for them to do when they put the system in, remove the old.
No,
valve.
no, how that went was we elected to do that ourselves, and they've been taken away with it. To save the money versus paying.
I didn't know what they bought.
Yeah.
Finished.
No,
So we are gonna.
yeah, and we've been taken.
That's it. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
And the motion to adjourn, I'll second.
All in favor?
All right.